Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to this session of Just Thinking. We are doing Town Government 101 tonight. Doing it on Zoom. Unfortunately, we're having technical difficulties with television and with Facebook. So that's okay, because this is where we're actually going to have the conversation, and the other sites were only going to be, audio and video. So anyway, joining me is, it says Cece LeBeau, but I know it's Paul because I really know the difference, but that's okay. So Paul, wave. You're the only male sitting here at the moment, so I think that's okay. But okay, so Paul LeBeau. Paul was town administrator in Holliston. Well, he had several different titles, but in effect, town administrator. I'll let him do that in a minute. But just to explain what we're going to try to do here, obviously the studio, I'm in the studio, Paul's at home, and all of you are at home. Bruce Guilfoy is operating the system in the studio, and we'll keep letting people into the room and so forth. If you have something that you want to convey in writing to him, use the features on Zoom. And when we get to the point where we're taking questions, you can just raise your hand or, use the raise hand function on Zoom. And Paul and I will take questions. I'd like this to be more about questions and answers than a real formal presentation, but I do need to at least make a few comments to get us sort of focused. The reason we've decided to do this is February 1st, kickoff month or day for elections in Holliston. It's now people are able to take nomination papers out to run for public office. This is also the period in which you would register to vote if you're not currently registered. Cutoff date is April 6th. So I decided that every year I try to do something about the elections, but this year it seemed like it was a good idea to try to do more. My goal is pretty simple and straightforward. I would like to see more people participate in town meeting, and you should, by the end of this session, understand why that's important. I'd like to see more people run for public office or agree to get appointed to public office. And I'd like to see more people vote in the town election. Our town elections generally only get about 10%, up to 15% maybe, for if there's a ballot question or an override or something, then we'll get more, but generally it's 10%. And that's pretty paltry. That's, we have about 10,000 voters, so it's 1,000 voters are making those decisions. I'd like to see that ramp up. I'd like to see some new people. I'd like to see people get more engaged in the process. So let's hope that this effort will help. Tonight, we're going to talk about the overview of government, and we're going to show you now in a minute. I'm going to go to Paul and have Paul introduce himself so he can just jump in at any time and not confuse people.
All right. Thank you, Mary. It's nice to be with you virtually. My name is Paul LeBeau. I served as town administrator in the town of Holliston from 1994 to 2015. And from 1983 to 1994, I held various other administrative positions in the town before I became town administrator. So I've been to a few town meetings, and I have a fairly good sense of how they operate, and hopefully can add something to the discussion tonight.
Okay, and I served on the board, at that time, Board of Selectmen, Select Board twice, two different decades, once in the 80s and then again in the late 90s. I'm currently serving on the Board of Assessors, and I've done HCAT for well over a decade, and each year, as I say, I try to do something to do with the elections. Eventually, once we have candidates, I will interview all of the candidates that run for contested seat where there's some opponent, and we'll get an opportunity to find out what they're all about. So right now, I'm going to ask Bruce in the studio to show a visual, a graphic of the overview of town government. And I love this graphic. Paul put this together ages ago, and it was for something I wanted to put into the, yeah, there it is. Is that beautiful or what? look at how horizontal that is. All right. If you look at the voters at the very top, those are us. Those are the people who are supposed to go to town meeting. And that is where it all starts, is at town meeting. And all you need to do is be a registered voter in Holliston to be able to attend and to vote. If you continue to look at that, all the little blue dots and stuff, the blue or whatever color you call it, it could be green, it could be aqua. All of those are elected boards, elected officials, and they have no reporting requirements one to the other. So the select board does not supervise the Board of Assessors or the school committee or the Board of Health, nor does the select board oversee the staff in those departments. So you can see how horizontal everything is. When you look at the pink boxes, those are all folks that are on appointed committees that report to somebody, in most cases, the select board, and in a couple of cases to others. But this chart and a couple of other charts that are related are available on the website, the town's website. You can check them out anytime and pore over them. Bruce, can you scroll down just a smidge so that we can see that the town administrator is the only place in which we see that somebody has some other action? You know, there's a little more activity, a little more of a vertical hierarchy. And all of those yellow and those green positions are paid positions. The rest of them are unpaid positions. The blue ones and the pink ones are unpaid. The green and yellow are paid positions, they're staff. So anyway, let's go back to town meeting. And I think the best place to start with town meeting is to say that it basically establishes the budget. That's, you know, perhaps its most important or significant. I think we can take down the chart anytime you want. Thanks. The budget's the biggie. All the line items for every department are voted on. It's painful. It's painful. We don't argue and debate every line item unless somebody has a question, but it's called the omnibus article. And then there are a bunch of other articles. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this part over to Paul and say, okay, what is it that gets town meetings started? And what happens behind the scenes to get us to a town meeting with a warrant, with a bunch of articles? And take it away, Paul.
Okay. Well, the first thing that happens is right around January 1, the select board officially announces the date of the upcoming annual town meeting in May. And that kind of is a kickoff of the process. From then until the first Monday after the first Friday in May, which is the first night of the May town meeting. So from January through May, the select board goes through a process of reviewing the budgets of all those agencies, departments, and committees that report to them. And in reality, the town administrator does the bulk of that work together with the department heads in developing those budgets, reviewing them with the select board, and sending them along to the finance committee for the finance committee's review. The independently elected boards, such as the school committee, the planning board, housing authority, assessors, and so forth, they develop their own budgets independently, and then they send them directly to the finance committee for the finance committee's review. While that's all that is going on, the various departments and committees, and in some cases citizens groups, will submit requests for items to be considered at the town meeting. The town meeting considers what are called articles. Each item to be considered is called an article. And the articles can range anywhere from acquiring some open space property to purchasing equipment, to modifying bylaws, to changing rules and regulations governing everything from dogs to licenses. And those requests all come into the select board. The select board is ultimately responsible for putting together the warrant for the town meeting, which is the list of all the articles to be considered. And they sign off on that. And then they forward that to the moderator and also to the finance committee. About 7 days before the beginning of town meeting, the warrant has to be finalized and posted publicly. And also about 7 days prior to the start of town meeting, the finance committee issues its report on all of the items that have been slated for consideration at the town meeting. So that report includes all of the articles in the warrant, the entire warrant, with the finance committee's recommendations on action on each of the items. And that report is available 7 days before the meeting electronically. It's also in print at various locations around town, the police station, the town hall, the senior center, the library, for anybody who just doesn't have access to an electronic copy. And that report is also made available in print form as people arrive at the town meeting on the first night of the town meeting, so that they can have a printed copy in front of them if they want. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's the process. It starts with the select board and kind of transitions to the finance committee for their recommendations, and then goes to town meeting for consideration by any voter who wants to come and participate.
Okay, thanks, Paul. The first thing, excuse me, one of the things that I hear from lots of people is that walking into town meeting feels intimidating. And I have to admit, even at times, as many years as I've gone to town meeting, and it's over 50 at this point, 50 years, not 50 town meetings, but a lot more than that. It is intimidating. You're talking into a microphone, you're facing a bunch of people, most of whom you don't know, and you're also facing a bunch of empty seats. And truthfully, sometimes it's the empty seats that bug the daylights out of me more than anything, because it's sort of standing there saying to yourself, why am I bothering? Does anybody really care? So it can be intimidating. And if you don't like talking in public, then it's really a turnoff. But it's not a bad experience once you kind of get into it. And actually, after a period of time, it's pretty much like wearing slippers. You just, that's it. You got used to it and everything's okay. Now, one other thing that I've heard people complain about is the legalese. That is the language that's used in the warrant. And why do we have certain articles that are like the same exact thing every single session? So by session, I mean spring and fall.
Mm-hmm.
So, Paul, why are those articles, and they're generally at the beginning, in fact, are always at the beginning, what are those articles? What are those about?
Well, we used to affectionately refer to them as the boilerplate, but they are things that have to be done every year to comply with state law governing certain activities of town government. At the May town meeting, the first 10 or 12 articles in the warrant are the same pretty much every year. And what they do is they authorize the town to conduct certain activities during the upcoming year in order to comply with state law, requirements of state law. And that also is part of the reason why they appear to be in such legalese, is because they are written in order to comply with the state law, which is written in very arch legal terms. And so we try to mirror that language in order to safely comply with the state statutes. And in some cases, articles appear both in the spring and the fall, and oftentimes those are just opportunities to conduct certain activities. For instance, allow the selectmen to dispose of surplus property that may have become surplus over the last 6 months. There are also repetitive articles regarding putting money into reserve funds, such as the capital expenditure fund and the stabilization fund. Those funds are reserves that are set aside in order to meet extraordinary expenses as they come up in the future. And so those are in every town meeting to give the town an opportunity to put some money in the bank, so to speak. But a lot of the legalese, even in the non-repetitive articles, again, is a function of state law and legal requirements. For instance, if the town wants to borrow money, either to build a new building or to buy, a lot of equipment, there are state laws governing what towns can what towns can borrow money for, and the limits on how long they can borrow the money, and other requirements have to be met. So those articles are written in a very legalistic form in order to comply with the requirements of state law. And the same thing happens if, like, we want to buy a piece of property. Again, you've got to try to comply with state laws and specifically define what the property is, what it's going to be used for, who's going to oversee it on behalf of the town. All of those things have to be addressed in a kind of a legalistic form. And part of the reason I think why the traditionally articles are written in a very stiff arch kind of format is also there's a long-standing law in Massachusetts which is rarely invoked, but it's called a 10 taxpayer suit, which allows a group of 10 or more taxpayers to go to court and challenge the legality of an appropriation of money at a town meeting. It doesn't happen very often. I think it happened more frequently many years ago. And so part of the reason for framing the articles the way they are written is to, again, try to ensure that we're complying with all the legal requirements, and so that if there is a lawsuit involving it, at least the structure of the article and the motion that was voted was legally proper.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give you an example of something and then very shortly open this up to questions. But if in fact there were an article on the warrant, not stuck within the omnibus in the budget, but an article, and the article was long and it could take up a whole page.
Mhm.
By the end of that page, that whole page is not what gets read into the meeting. Well, somebody reads that, the town moderator. By the way, I should have said that. There is an elected position called town moderator, and that person sits up on the stage with the town clerk, who is also another elected position, and they basically run town meeting. And so the town moderator, in this case, Bill Mayer, he is the one who decides the process. I mean, he maintains the law and does the process the way it's supposed to be. But if anything happens that's unusual or whatever, he's the decision maker. So every article has to have a motion, and that is always much shorter, or hopefully much shorter than the article. And the motion is usually just to raise and appropriate X number of dollars to buy a whatever, okay, to buy a piece of land for open space. Now, let's make believe for just the moment that the article was about sidewalks. This happens to be one of my pet passions, so I'm going to throw it in. We're going to have an article about sidewalks, and the town, whoever presents the article, probably the select board, says, okay, we want to spend $100,000 on sidewalks next year. Well, I've been waiting for generations for more money to be spent on sidewalks, so I decide I want to amend this article. And I want to do it from the floor, which means I'm kind of bypassing all the process everybody else already went through to go to the finance committee and explain their budgets. And finance committee has a balanced budget right now, but I'm about to go up there and mess up their budget, basically, by now suggesting that I want to add another $25,000 to that. I want to see them spend $125,000, not just 100. And so they will ask, they meaning the town moderator, I'm sorry, me to give a motion. And so I will make a motion that I am amending the original article, and I'm making a motion to increase the funding from $100,000 to $125,000. Now, there are a couple of other things there that are going to happen. We're going to have to second that, and there could be a discussion and so forth. What you don't have to do is to identify where that money is going to come from. So don't be intimidated by the idea that you're sitting at town meeting and somebody's going to suggest to you that, oh, better figure out where the money's going to come from. How do we know, right? Point is, the finance committee, the department heads, the town administrator, whoever, will have to come up with what the recommendation is about where the money comes from. But you as a town resident can amend an article that's on the floor. You can make a motion to do it. Then there's an opportunity to discuss your amendment. And it may fail, it may fly, who knows? But once we deal with the amendment, then we go back to the original article, and that usually follows in the flip form. So if yours passed, then the next one will fail. The original motion, which was for only 100,000, would fail. So that sounds a little complicated and convoluted. Inside the finance committee report, or maybe it's inside in the warrant itself, but in one of the documents you get at town meeting, all of these terms are defined. There's a glossary of terms. So, motions and all that kind of thing. It's all there. And so you can look at it. You can look at it ahead of time, sort of, get used to the terminology. And again, don't be intimidated, and find people who are used to going to town meeting and ask them, talk to them. As I say, it is not brain surgery, truly, and really, it is not brain surgery. So that's a big brain dump right now. So I'm going to allow you to ask questions. I mean, does anybody have anything that pops to mind? Hi there. Hi, Minnie. You are muted. You are muted. Muted. Is she, Dawn, what's happening? I can't hear her.
Let's see.
There you are. There you are. Minnie?
I'm going to ask her to unmute.
Minnie, did you unmute? There. Are you there?
Should be there.
You can hear me. I can't hear you. Oh dear.
All right.
You can't control it, can you, Don?
No, let me.
Yeah, so we all were muted, and now we had an option to select unmute, and I think many need to select unmute.
Okay, everybody better be unmuted. It can't.
Yeah, she's there.
Okay, just Minnie,
She should be there.
Can you hear, or can you speak?
Yep.
No? Well, I have no idea. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, while we figure out what's going on with poor Minnie. You gotta love technology. This is great when it works, and when it doesn't, it's just a big pain. It says to them that the host is
Right.
muting everybody. And unmute yourself. Do it. Okay.
She needs to be unmuted, and I clicked ask to unmute. Yeah, I clicked that. Let these people in.
There you go.
There we are.
All right,
There she
there you
is.
go.
Okay, now we can hear
Thank
Minnie.
you.
Yes. So hi, Mary. Hi, Paul. Thank you for doing this. We all were very interested in trying to figure out how the town thing works. And I'll be honest with you, it was a lot to take in the first go, and but it did give us some idea. So I have one question. Now, suppose, so I got the idea that if I were to go to a town hall meeting as a resident, I would be able to, give my opinion or have an article amended. Now, a couple of things. Do I have to have my name written in ahead of time in case I want to present something or even amend an article? Do I have to give notification ahead of time? Or can I just do it on the floor? How does that process work?
Either way, Paul, if I step on a hornet's nest here, I mean, if you have something prepared, I would suggest if you have something that you do it in writing, because you will be asked to write out whatever your amendment is, your motion is. So it's a good idea to be prepared to do that.
Okay.
If you know ahead of
I
time,
can't do
it's
it. My
not a
laptop's not connecting. Oh, okay.
you can,
Supposed to be on the educational channel? It's not gonna be. Okay. I can't do it.
Bruce, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think other people also still can't unmute themselves. So whoever is the host has to release the
yeah.
function for everyone. So Amalini just is writing that she can't. Mira is writing she can't. So
Oh,
We
if you,
would, we would unmute the people. If they raise their hand, then we'll unmute them.
oh,
Give
I
the option to
see.
mute.
Okay. All right. So
Great.
so I'll just add another question before I'll just move on to someone else who wants to ask. The other thing is that if I want to be a volunteer in the town, like, in the town, what is the exact process? Is there a paperwork that I fill, or I just look in the town calendar or the town website and see what positions are there, and I simply turn up when the meeting is held? How does that work?
okay, so there is a page on the website for volunteer positions that are open. So if they're Conservation Commission, not that, I won't use that one, I shouldn't use that. But if there's an opening on a vacancy on some committee, it will tell you there whether you're going to submit an application, and I'll define that in a minute, but submit to the Board of Health. It'll depend on which committee it is and which committee, who that reports to. Typically, it's the select board, and typically the request to serve would go to the town administrator. Now, the request to serve can be, in the email, you can just say why you're interested in serving on the housing committee and, a couple of sentences about yourself. If you have a resume, it's really helpful for them to understand what kind of background you have so that they don't end up with 5 lawyers on the same committee. You like to end up with some balance of, somebody maybe with some finance experience or somebody who has social services experiences. So if you have a resume, if you don't have a formal resume, and it doesn't have to be a formal resume, so you don't have to create one, then in your email or in an attached letter, you want to define, I think I could be helpful to this committee because I've worked in public health, or I've worked in whatever the situation is. And that's about it, because what happens is you submit that. Now, if there are several applicants for the same position, it may come to being interviewed by the committee. We don't have too many times when that happens, when we have a real, a real battle over who's gonna get in there. So that's pretty much it. Paul, did I leave anything out?
No, you didn't. And you're right that in normal times, it would probably involve a brief interview with the selectmen if it's a committee that they appoint. I imagine in this era of COVID, they'd probably do it by Zoom. I remember shortly before I retired, I had a gentleman come into my office and said he would like to serve on a committee. I asked him if he had a particular interest. He said, no, I just retired and I need something to do. So, so you want to be a little bit more specific than that, but not, you don't have to be a lot of detail to get it started.
So I just want to add, those who are new to Zoom or don't use Zoom as much, at the bottom of your screen, you will see something called reactions. If you click reactions, you will see something which says raise hand. So if you click that button, raise hand, the host will unmute you for your next question. So I will mute myself now.
Thank you, Minnie. All right, anybody else? Come on, don't be shy. You can't. All right. So go ahead, did somebody want to say something?
I was-
Somebody's
Yeah,
coming
I
up.
have a quick question. Sorry, here. This is Payal here. My question is, so correct me if I'm wrong. So there are open positions which are sort of volunteering positions where, if you want to, be a part of committee, you can apply. But I was wondering how those positions are getting filled that are being paid in this particular hierarchy. So is that
Okay.
these volunteer people do play any sort of role in selecting for those positions or no?
Well, the select board, all of those major boards, the ones that were the light aqua color across the top, they have staff and they often have affiliated committees. The staff are paid and they do hire, so the select board hires paid staff. The Board of Health hires paid staff. Those are not listed in the same section as the volunteer opportunities. It's in the same section, but not the same page. If you are interested in a job with the town, a paid job with the town, then you need to, again, look at that section of the website, the town's website. So it's Town of Holliston .org, .mass, I don't even remember. I do it so automatically. But if you look at the Town of Holliston website, you can go to the section about positions that are available. And they would, on that, it will spell out what the job description is and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, my question is whether these volunteers do play any sort of role in selecting for those positions or not.
Depends on the board. It depends. I mean, if there are yes, in a nutshell. So the Board of Health that they're all elected and they're all volunteers and they hire the staff. They are the ones who decide who they will hire to be the director. Or in the case of the select board, they get to hire the town administrator. And that's, we haven't even touched on that, but that's a significant post in our community. So yes, the volunteers have some influence now, or excuse me, have some responsibility. One thing we didn't talk about is that, you have this town government, which is pretty much what we've been talking about, and then the school department. The rules of operation in the school department are a little bit different. The school committee hires and fires the superintendent, but the superintendent's responsible for the rest of the hiring and firing. Unless that's changed am I still okay, Paul?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. So if you wanted to run for the school committee, need to understand that the school committee, years and years ago, school committee had an enormous amount of authority. They picked out the books, they decided the curriculum, they decided, who was hired, and so forth. But back in the 90s, in the early 90s, with the, whatever they called it, and I can't remember it now, but this great reform, they took away that autonomy and they basically vested it in the superintendent, and the superintendent rises or falls according to how he or she behaves. And that's what the school committee sets policy, school committee reviews the superintendent, and the school committee can hire and fire. That's basically it. But they're still busy all the time. There's always stuff that they're involved in, but they don't have the kind of autonomy they used to.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks.
Yep.
If I could just quickly add, Mary, that the official website for the town is townofholliston.us. And also in the case of paid positions for the town, as you noted, they're displayed separately on the website, and there is a formal application process in that case. There's an actual application for employment that has to be completed. And then, the department that oversees that position will, review the applications and schedule interviews and so forth.
Any other questions?
Yes, so Minnie back here, I had a quick question. So is there any training involved when, suppose if a person joins the committee? So is there a training given to them which is specific to the work of the committee, or it just is based on experience and they just learn as they go?
Oh, boy, you really hit a sore spot on this one, Minnie. I mean, there should be, that should be the answer. There aren't very many communities in the state of Massachusetts that are able to provide that kind of training. You will be trained on the open meeting law. Town clerk runs that regularly for new elected officials so that they understand what the rules are regarding that, so that you don't end up in conflict with it and kind of get yourself messed up or anybody else. But there is no formal training. What I did as my first time on the selectmen was I got involved with the Mass Municipal Association and tried to figure out things from what they provided, because they do provide training. If you were joining the finance committee, you could do the same kind of thing. But for the most part, as it stands today, you're learning as you go. Unfortunately, I think this is a weakness in the system, because you can only learn what the other people on that committee know. So if you come across something or come up with a question that, they can't answer, or that they answer incorrectly, you don't necessarily know that. So I think there should be, but no, there isn't. There are ways to get the knowledge, but it's not a formal piece of training by the town.
If I could, Mary, there's a couple of exceptions to that. Assessors are required to attend a training program, which is pretty comprehensive, perhaps even overwhelming.
Yeah, having had to take that one, I know, why didn't I think of that? I had to go to UMass for a week and sit there and listen to town assessing. But anyway, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and the Mass Municipal Association, as you mentioned, I think has gotten a little more involved in that. There are statewide organizations like for conservation and for planning and for selectmen and finance committees and so forth. And many of them have handbooks or guidebooks or online resources available through the Mass Municipal Association. The town holds a membership to that association, and so by virtue of that, most town officials can access all the resources of the Mass Municipal Association. But it's not the kind of thing where you take the position and then it's okay, your 101 training starts tomorrow. You kind of have to go out and seek it and find it, and it's not like a typical employment situation. It's a little different, as you pointed out. You've got to go find it and go get it.
Yep.
The other way that you can get the training, quite honestly, is during the process of running for the office. And I would urge anybody who considers running for one of these offices to attend every meeting leading up to the election. First of all, you'll be a better candidate for the community. And second of all, you'll be starting, you'll be getting off on the right foot, and you'll be far ahead and won't be catching up. But watching it, being there, learning the terminology, because every one of these departments, they don't mean to have foreign languages that they talk, but all of this government, the acronyms, what the jargon is and so forth, you get a little more used to it if you listen to it week after week. You have a chance to go home and look things up, or you have a chance to call one of the members. I'm sure that I know I always have. I'm always available to answer questions by people who are running. If you're willing to run for office, I think everybody should bend over backwards to give you as much advice and support as they can possibly give. They get to vote in the ballot box and decide who they want, but everybody deserves an equal opportunity to be able to run and to get the answers to their questions. That's kind of part of. Oh. I thought I shut that off, Ruth. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Anyway.
Thanks, Mary. I think Malini has a question, so I'll just mute. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Mary, and hi, Paul.
How are you?
good seeing you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I just, since this meeting is about trying to include and make the governance in Holliston a lot more diverse,
Mhm.
how is it that we can actually come and join in some of these committees, which already seem to have people in place, which are so tight knit that it's very hard to get in? I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if it's making sense. I
No,
am on one committee which is not like it's not governing, but it's just a part committee in Holliston. And
Mhm.
I've been with you also, Mary,
Right,
in the
we had
housing
a housing committee and,
board. Yeah.
um,
But I mean, how do we get in? Because I feel that we are, not able to make our presence, be a part of that committee. So I don't know if.
again, follow what's on the web site for where there are vacancies in positions, okay? Because they come up all the time. I can't tell you anything off the top of my head, but the select board town administrator, I think, typically maintains a list that stays on the website. So let's assume somebody was actually interested in running. The way that you find out about that is like right now. So it's February, nomination papers are available. If you want to, now people are deciding, do they want to run again? So you might have a committee of seven rather. And somebody decides his term is up and he's not gonna run again, all right? So take out nomination papers and pursue that. And it is running for a public office, and that may be a little more intimidating than doing an appointed position. Maybe you'll find an appointed position that looks interesting. Wherever there's a vacancy, give it a shot. Maybe you start on something like the sustainability. Maybe they're looking for folks, or maybe you get onto the Friends of the Library and work your way up, get involved and know what's going on and meet people and network, and then work your way into being on the library trustees, or, it's that kind of thing. You're giving me good ideas, because part of my mission in life is to try to get the word out for things. Well, what you're saying is something that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, so on that note, there are some committees, like for example, the housing board, when we had the committee,
Yep.
it wasn't like running for office.
Oh, no.
So what about such committees which do not necessarily need to be running for office? How do people get to know that they're there? I mean, I got to know, thankfully,
Because
I'm
I
grateful to
called you.
you, Mary. Yeah.
I am relentless when
You
I'm
roped
looking
me
for
in.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I'm a part of the cultural committee too, and I
Yep.
was on the Friends board.
Yep.
So I've done all those, but those were because I went out and I looked, and since I had been a part of a Friends board earlier, so it gave me that incentive to actually do it again.
Mhm.
But if it's not for office, how do we find these committees, which maybe people would not want to go and run for office, get signatures and all that stuff. They
Sure.
want to still be a part, but how do they do that?
Those would be the appointed committees, and that's the biggest chunk of committees that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, again, on the town website, under volunteer positions, open positions, that's where they would be listed. And
Okay.
so anytime somebody steps off of one of those positions and ends up with, like somebody steps off the recycling committee or whatever and leaves a vacancy, that vacancy is posted on the town website in the section for volunteer positions.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
I just
Yes.
mentioned that, as Mary said, that the appointed committees, for instance, the selectmen appoint over 30 committees. And so at any given point in time, there's probably at least half a dozen vacancies, if not more, among those committees, because most of those committees have 5 or 7 people. So you can see what vacancies are available on the website. If you're more interested in finding out what what are those committees, then there's also on the website a list of all the boards and committees And for most of those boards and committees, if you click on the name of that committee, you'll see a list of the members of the committee. You may recognize the name, and then, you know, you can talk to somebody who's on the committee and get a little more information about it. But ultimately, I think Mary's point was great in the sense that if you just get involved with something and then you kind of catch the bug a little bit, and you want to do more, you want to get involved in more, or you may see a particular issue or a particular area of interest that speaks to you, and then you can, you know, look at joining that committee or maybe even running for a committee if it's an elected committee. But just taking that first step and getting involved, I think is critical, and you'll find out whether you enjoy it, whether it's for you, and if you do, then, you know, there are 30 or 40 committees to choose from.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
I would recommend that people follow their own personal interests. So youth and family services, if you have a bent to being involved in human services, social services, that kind of thing. If you're really, really good with numbers and that's what you like, then you look for, you know, the finance committee, or maybe there'll be a building committee for something. And, you know, every time there's a new project in town, by the way, we create a new committee. So like if we were, gosh, if we ever did go ahead and try to build a new high school, there'll be a building committee. And recently we've been on a real roll about creating committees. You know, we've got one doing the stipend and, you know, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So if you know, you kind of got to keep track of that with maybe the Holliston Reporter, when the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board announces a new committee, that's where it would be. Anyway, Lisa Kaplan was helpful enough here just to put out the list that says for elected positions, you've got one member of the Board of the Select Board, one on the Board of Assessors, 2 positions on the Finance Committee, 1 on the Board of Health, 1 on the Housing Authority, and let me explain what that is in just a second. The Library Trustees, the Park Commission a library has 2, Park Commission has 2, Planning Board has 1, and School Committee has 3. Housing Authority. This is a one that is hard for people to kind of figure out who are these people. The Cole Court, the public housing, brick buildings where they were just doing all that big septic tank kind of remodeling down at in East Holliston. The Housing Authority supervises that property. It's really a state-owned property, and that group of people is responsible for its oversight and management and so forth to keep I think there are like, I don't know, I want to say 60 units in there, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, so that the Housing Authority is different from a housing committee. There is a housing trust, which deals with affordable housing. Malini and I served on a committee that was intended to go look at market affordability housing. Truly, we were kind of stumbling along, and then COVID came and that kind of just shot it all to blazes. But finding market affordability, we ran into some huge issues that I don't think Holliston could salvage. So anyway, okay, anybody else got anything? Okay, just feel free to raise your hand at any time so that I will move a little bit on to the actual elected boards that I just ran through, the positions of Select Board and Board of Assessors and the rest of those. Each of those, I'm going to guess there are 9 of them up there, 9 different department, you know, boards, but I could be wrong. Each of those is elected independently. And this is one of the critical things that people find really, really hard to understand about town government, at least as we run it. There are other towns in Massachusetts who do it differently. But as we continue to do it is in the original fashion, which is they are all elected independently, which means even if I'm the chairman of the select board, I do not have the authority to tell the Board of Health what they should or should not be doing in response to COVID or in response to anything. I can't, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, dictate how anybody else should run the department. And, you know, they have certain things that they try to do collectively, so that if you wanted to change the hours of your own office, Board of Health, let's say, and you wanted it to be open from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night, I suppose you could, although there would be a whole lot of hoopla and ultimately you couldn't, just because that becomes inconvenient for the public. But they are autonomous, they are independent. And therefore, if you want to get things done, we're doing it by collaboration. We're doing it by just real hard work, frankly. When there's a project, I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, have heard about the project at 555 Hopping Brook Road. As big as that project is, and as many things as relate to it, really the biggest burden, the biggest influence is in the planning board. That's it. You know, that's just the reality. They're the ones that are charged with that kind of work. So you might be able to understand and be a little patient with the fact that sometimes things operate slowly. Now, Paul, as the town administrator, or even back when you were when the title was executive secretary, back when you and I first worked together back in the really dark ages, you, even then, anywhere along the progression, you were given more authority. We even went to the town administrator bylaw. We went to the state and got permission through a special act to create the town administrator position and give you more authority. But even at that, you didn't have that kind of supervisory authority over any of those other boards and departments. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, you just mentioned as an example, office hours. And, you know, when we decided that, or felt that the town hall should have some sort of evening hours to make it a little more accessible for people who work, we were open 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. And we thought, well, let's see if we can stay open into the evening one night a week. And then, you know, people could leave, you know, we'll close down early, say on Friday afternoon. And it worked out. We came up with a schedule and it worked out. But, you know, you looked around the building and there were 5 offices in the town hall that were under the jurisdiction of independently elected boards and committees. So you really had to sit down and work through it and collaborate on something as simple as, you know, when is the building open to the public for business? Which goes to the whole notion of how the government can, because of its structure, there's a tendency for it to work a little more slowly than people might like or expect. And it's kind of the dynamic tension that I always used to talk about, is that on the one hand, we would like government to operate efficiently like a business, but on the other hand, we want to be able to oversee government and keep our eye on government so that it doesn't, you know, go too far. And so there's that kind of dynamic tension to maintain some part of both of those pieces. But yeah, there's nobody who's, you know, there's no one in the chart of organization that oversees the whole ball game. It's, you know, it's a sharing of responsibility and authority, and it relies on the collaboration and goodwill of the people who are in the positions that serve the town.
When I ask folks a question, does anybody want to comment on that? Is that surprising? Is that shocking? Is that absolutely a nightmare to your way of thinking? Does anybody have thoughts? Because I mean, I'm pretty used to it now, but I moved here from a city, and I remember my first town meeting in Upper Town Hall long before we had the high school, well, several years before we had the high school. And I was just totally flummoxed by the pure democracy of it, small d. It's just, it's wide open, you know, so anybody who has anything to say just stands up and says it. And it is a little bit challenging when you want to get something done. It'll take months. It'll take months. There's just no question, because the only thing in effect, the only time we make major decisions is twice a year, at the annual town meeting, and then we usually have a special town meeting in October. We could have them more frequently if the select board chose to do that. In the Wayback Machine, when Paul, you know, back in the 80s, we would occasionally have them at multiple times. We could have 5 or 6 in a year instead of just 2. But, you know, now that we're sort of in this routine and so forth of every 6 months, that's when the decisions are being made. The staff and the implementation is done as implementation throughout the next 6 months or year or however long it takes. So the decisions are made at town meeting, not the select board's meeting, not the park department's meeting. You know, the decisions about what's going to happen are at town meeting. And that's why I keep trying to press people that if you want to get involved, probably the first thing to do is to make sure that you go to town meeting. And I know a lot of people say we can't go to town meeting because we have kids, we have babysit. Well, maybe somebody can stay home, or maybe you one night you go with, you know, cover for a friend, or we may be able to. Some folks are talking about trying to get the high school kids that would, you know, be able to help with this kind of thing. But at any rate, any questions from you folks? Okay. Then my goal with tonight was just to get this far and to kind of just not bore everybody totally to tears. If you want to keep going, we, you know, I guess I better shouldn't change plans via horses midstream. I'm sure that's not recommended, since I've been talking about it the other way. My goal out of the next meeting would be to delve more deeply into the specifics about each of these boards and departments, so that you get to understand the elected boards. What are their roles? How do they actually affect and influence what's being done? What do they do with the staff that they have? I know somebody asked already tonight, you know, who hires those people? Are they hired by the volunteer committees? Yeah, mostly. In some cases, no. The town administrator, we haven't even talked about him. In our particular case, it's a him, it could be a her. The town administrator, we haven't delved into the depths of what that position holds. So I think we'll call it a night there. Paul, is there anything that you think on the matter of town meeting, the general overview of how we're built, anything that we've left out would be?
I'm not sure anything's been left out. I think you hit on a very good point, which is that it can be intimidating, especially for a first timer. But try to get past that. It's not only, you know, in terms of speaking at town meeting, it's not only the fear of public speaking, but it's just probably talking about something that is not familiar to you. And so it may just feel a little uncomfortable. But my sense from sitting at town meetings, looking out at the audience behind the table, was that we could go on for half an hour, 45 minutes, going through the basic articles. And when somebody finally gets up from the audience and asks a question, it's like an icebreaker. You know, once one person does it, then other people say, hey, yeah, we can do this. You know, we can speak, we can ask questions, we can be a part of this. So it just takes one person to get it rolling.
Good observation. You're right. It's because you always sat looking at the audience. Yeah, you're right. It does take that one person to start it, and then it sort of does tumble along. Yeah. Let's see. The warrant specifically was one thing, just to make sure If you don't know what the town warrant looks like, you can find it. Again, go to the town website. Just type up in the search box town warrant. And here we go. Yeah, Bruce in the studio is leading us through. So you're going to go through and you're going to go to town meetings. And you'll find the warrant for the annual town meeting from this last year in July, which is a very atypical meeting because that was the one right in the worst of the COVID times. And so it was shorter. But this is the tedium of what the warrant looks like. And they always explain, there's always a section with comments. And all the term warrant means is providing authority, giving somebody authority to do something. And in this case, the authority is usually to spend some money or to, implement a bylaw or whatever. Thank you, Bruce. But anytime that you want to see that or you want to review what the town meeting warrant, you can look at there on the website. The other location to look at is the town clerk's. She has election information up there. She has the how does town meeting work up there. It's a manual that was put out by the state. So there are other resources than just this opportunity here. And we will do this again. We'll have another meeting next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. And then we'll skip school vacation and do one more. I think that should cover it. And by that time, hopefully some people will start taking out papers and so forth, and we'll be talking to candidates. So thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that you spent some time with us. I love this stuff. I've always had a passion for this stuff, or I have since I came here anyway. Didn't know I had a passion for it until I got here. But I hope this has been helpful, and I hope we can continue to be helpful to you, and you'll come back next week. Thanks. And over and out. Paul, thank you for stepping in and helping me. I'll see you next week.
All right, thank you.
All righty. Good night, everybody.